Hello and welcome to the first replay analysis of Vasily Krysov. In this match we have some Goon players on the Pact team who came into a match which was stacked on the Blue Force side by Walker, Defoliate and Texter. So for this match we can assume that both teams have a reasonable amount of coordination within their groups. Now the map is Trondheim. Pretty decent map, interesting play. Mostly the conflicts, however, are concentrated on Echo and Foxtrot. Now, taking us to have a quick look at Blue 4 and speeding it up so that we can get through this a little quicker. We can see that they're deploying out their command vehicles and a couple of Chinooks with mountaineers inside and some escort helicopters as well. We can assume that this group will be going to Echo. And we also saw in the corner there some helicopters that would be en route to Foxtrot. Now for the Red 4 side, we can see a big cluster of Mi-24s near that road where the rest of the forces that will go to Echo and Gulf are located. And also a smaller group that will be taking the side road to the call-in point and the far capture point on the opposite side of the map. Pretty heavy on the ground forces as they don't need to travel nearly as far as Blue Team. And as we can see on Blue Team, a lot more lighter on the ground, so we can assume that they've put a lot more into their air fighters and bomber force from the get-go. Now zooming out just a little so we can see the map again. We can see how the map easily divides itself into two distinct halves with two sectors in the middle. And we've started. MiG-29, opening play by Red 4, which will also have some MiG-29 Biz in support. Now those are the Czech MiG-21s, so they have an extra little bit of longer range punch over their Polish counterparts. However, the Polish are packing more missiles and thus more firepower once they get in close. And here we see the counter response by Blue 4's Air coming in, some Eagles and a CF-18 Hornet. Now despite this fight being very much in favour of Blue 4, it ends up being a pretty equal trade, and it also means that both sides are prevented from intercepting any enemy helicopter pushes. As we can see in Foxtrot, the Mi-24Ds are just tearing those CH-135s apart, and they're gone in an instant. So now the drop in Foxtrot is pretty much unopposed. And as we can see here in Echo, the Blue 4 helicopter drop has actually overstepped its bounds and has gone beyond where they should have landed. If they'd actually held themselves back a couple of hundred more meters onto where that OH-58C is, they would have been able to drop off their troops without taking any enemy fire, and this would have kept them in better morale and would have avoided losses. And as we can see, panic move in of an ADAT, which then just got simply fucked up by the rocket pods of the Mi-24Ds. And the light ground forces that they had tagged to push into Foxtrot have just been absolutely wasted by those Hinds. And we can see that Blue 4 are moving up a command vehicle to take Echo and to solidify their hold there. However, the fight for Foxtrot is going very much in favour of Red 4. However, I'm very curious that they called in truck-borne infantry for countering those Hinds. They would have been far better off by using more solid support options. Now here we have the situation where Panzer has actually moved up his Nordschützen up the side of the mountain in order to outflank the enemy that was holding the summit. Now, Nordschützen in close quarters combat against Mountaineers. Mountaineers are absolutely goners. No way in hell they can beat those Motorschützen, because Motorschützen are absolutely premier assault troops for Red 4. Their machine guns are close quarters combat, so they can use it in all situations. They have shock rifles, so they shoot faster and more accurately than normal rifle squads, and they have pretty decent RPGs as well. And at only being 15 points each, they're quite a good price. And we see machine gun fire taking out the command jeep, and Red 4 pretty much have Echo in the bag. This means now that Blue 4 are very much on the back foot, because the two primary conflict zones are now out of reach for them. So this means that they're going to have to counter-attack into enemy defensive positions, which is a very much more difficult proposition than taking the zones in the first place. Not only that, as we can see here in Foxtrot, this means that the Red 4 players can shoot the enemy attackers as soon as they pop out of that spawning tunnel, and that means that there's no way for the Blue 4 players to effectively build up a sudden grouping of units of which to attack Foxtrot. And here we see a little bit of consolidation of the lines just happening, some harassing artillery fire on the Motorschützen in those buildings, but that's not going to do much damage. MiG-21 going after the Apache wasn't successful in its run, unfortunately. However, it did manage to get one rocket to hit the Apache. Little bit of a counter push happening on Foxtrot from Blue 4. However, those light tanks are not going to be sufficient to really push that point. And not only that, some T-64As are moving up on the point, and they are just going to have no troubles at all against those lighter tanks. T-64A will have better armor, better AP, accuracy, and speed than any of those units that they're opposing. So in equal points value, since when I counted this there was about 3 to 4 T-64As against such a random smattering of Centurions and Leopard C1s, there's really not much that they can do. And those Vandus are just going to get taken out by the Motorstrelki. Don't try to charge across open fields, kids. It's a bad idea. As we can see along the coastal road, or leading to Gulf, Panzer has a pretty solid defensive position there, a nice first line of defense. In my view, he should have actually gone for a more distributed defense with a lighter screening force at the front and heavier defenses in the town itself in order to have a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more reliability. Because in that sort of setup, you're very brittle. If the enemy smashes your first defensive line, you're kind of screwed, and it can lead to very bad things if the enemy are in a good position to exploit that. Now we see the charge of the Highlander Brigade, which is not going to go very well for them at all, because Highlanders, whilst being shock infantry, charging them forward in trucks is just not a good thing, and we can see that they're just getting absolutely slaughtered. Now, the Highlander's Eric's missile is a very powerful hitter, and it can often knock out, and it would have been able to knock out those T-64As in a single hit. However, due to the fact that they were deployed unfavourably, constantly getting panicked, getting stunned, they were unable to get any hits in against those tanks. Now we see here in the forest a little bit of competition going on between some riflemen and some Motorschützen, with some sappers on both teams moving in to intercept each other. Now, riflemen against Motorschützen, as you can probably imagine, not going to go well against them at all. However, as you can see, sappers are horribly powerful against enemy infantry squads. Those sappers, just a couple of gouts with the flamethrower, and they lost an entire squad of Mutschützen from full strength. It's easy to see how they've become a very dominant part of infantry on infantry fighting. Now, on the coastal road, we can see that the Bradley strayed a little bit too close to the enemy defences and ate a 2A46 shell to the face for its troubles. So a little bit of probing going on along that road. However, Blue 4 are certainly not going to have enough force to break through to Gulf, because not only is there a significant blocking detachment in those forests ahead of them, there's also the currently unoccupied troops of Echo. If there was pressure being placed on Echo itself, those troops would be too busy with their own court of problems. However, since they're just trying to push on for Gulf, it means that they're able to just shift those guys at the top of Echo to shoot down on the guys that would be coming through the valley to Gulf. A little bit more skirmishing going on here near Foxtrot, with T-64As taking pot shots at units as they come out, along with some Conkers getting in on the action as well. And Maz is moving up a BRDM-2U to solidify his control of Foxtrot. This means that Pact will now have a +2 advantage to their ticket direction, giving them quite the fast uptake of points and really put some pressure on Blue 4 to act quickly. Now, interestingly, this is a game which is very light on the artillery on both sides, which is very much showing how hard it is for Blue 4 to actually counter what's going on with Red 4 consolidating their lines, because artillery is the main means of disrupting enemy positions. Now, you can try to do the same thing using air power, using helicopters like these Seahawks here, but it's a lot more of a risky proposition, and it doesn't have the mass effect that you need to have. However, that said, as you can see, trying to take on good ATGM helicopters using gun-based AA isn't always the best of ideas, especially if it's only a solitary unit, because often those ATGM helicopters just need to get a single hit in to knock out the AA unit, while the AA unit needs to kind of sit there and roll lucky, which is annoyingly uncommon. Now, Mi-24D with some VDV going around the side of Delta, which is left completely open, not even a slight picketing force. However, it is going to get spotted by that Grizzly, and we can only assume that they're going to go for gold and go to the enemy spawn area to perhaps spot some artillery, or even maybe take out a command vehicle. And there's some artillery fire trying to take out the T-64A, which isn't going to really do much. And some mortar fire happening there, trying to guess for the command vehicle location in Gulf. That little copse of trees where they were shooting is a very popular spot for stopping the command vehicle. However, Panzer has put the Scott to another grouping of trees which are less likely to get hit. A little bit of probing again along the road, for unknown reasons however, because they just simply do not have the forces to make any use of such, and all they're doing is just throwing away Abrams. And Mi-24D being spotted by going by the fact that a scout helicopter with a minigun has been called in, which is going to have a now what we're going to have happen here, folks, is a absolute Thunderdome. 2 helicopters enter, 1 leaves. On the right we have the CH-136 minigun, very lightly armoured, but however the Mi-24D, which is going to be fighting, only 1 hit point left, so it could go either way. However, the Mi-24D is at elite, and Mi-24D dodges past the turret elevation limits, gets in and just gets knocked out in a second. Yet you can really see what effect that elite has on rapid fire weapons that are really close up. Just absolutely destroyed that scout helicopter in a second. Soviet power, comrades. However, this little scouting run has been rumbled, so unfortunately it means that the Blue 4 players are going to call in the forces necessary to root out these paratroopers before they can really achieve much. And here comes the first jet to get ready to take out the Mi-24D. And as we can see, Blue 4 know about the incursion. Still hasn't taken off, so those jets, cannot get shots on the helicopter. The VDV have gotten to cover, but unfortunately the next CH-136 that is called in is going to be able to spot them and make it available so that other forces can shoot at them. Mi-24 is about to take off, and yep, there we go, and killed by the Hornet. And those VDV of course have been spotted, getting shot at by the CH-136, and the Eagle is also shooting at it with its gun. They're absolutely screwed, so no point in concentrating on them anymore. As we can see along the main battle line, not much has changed. Not much in the way of force concentration going on by the way of Blue 4, just a sort of distributed line and no clear marshalling for an attack on a good sector. Now, due to the +2 ticket shift in Pact's favour, they definitely need to get moving fast. BMP getting some shots off, but unfortunately missing those chaparrals. Better luck next time. Very solid defences, as we can see, have been put up in Echo and Golf, and Blue 4 are really going to have to focus on trying to attack either of those directions, as going for Foxtrot is very unfavourable, because not only do they hold Foxtrot, but the forest between Foxtrot and Echo is also held, so that means that any given attack would be taking fire from 2 different directions, which is a very hard thing to fight against. And, as I said before, not much in the way of artillery support being used by Blue 4, so that means they can't really do much to alter the terms of the battle, so to speak. Because that would be the way you pick off like Tunguskas, absolutely panic and stun everything in a given area using, say, rocket artillery, or lay down smoke so that your forces can move in without casualties. There is a bit of action going on with those mortars, but it's simply just not at that point of which would cause any sort of significant change. Because when it comes to artillery, you really need to have enough of it to make a significant difference. Just 1 or 2 tubes just firing off randomly, it's a waste of points. Now here we see what happens when you try to send Seahawks against 2 Tunguskas. Very much a different result to taking on 1. Spetsnaz trying to rush across into the forest on the opposite side, wherever they get spotted and shot at by an autocannon and a medium machine gun on the Saracen, so they get stunned and panicked, and that just means that they can no longer move out of the way of fire, and they just basically end up sitting there until they're killed. RIP. lots of ATGM fire coming in on those Abrams, and it's all at minimum conkers, so those hits are really going to hurt. Another Abrams down. Now, just surveying what's going on in the battlefield, still not much action around Foxtrot, which is very much solidly still in Maz's hands, and we can guess, going by the build-up between Alpha and Bravo, that the Blue 4 players intend to have a push upon Golf, which is somewhat quite curious, because it means that unless they also are attacking into Echo at the same time, they are not going to see much success at all. Two platoons of M1 Abrams, two Chimeras, a couple of Chaparrals and Eyehawks backing them up, and they, Blue 4, appear to be getting ready to push harder on Golf than they have been. However, their piecemeal attacks before their probing has somewhat tipped their hand and made it so that Red 4 is very much well aware of where they're planning to push. However, when we also look at the balance of forces in this small fight, we're left with the conclusion that the Blue 4 attack is just basically screwed from the get-go due to insufficient preparation using supporting arms. Like those Abrams and Chimeras, in terms of total points value versus the T-72s, the BMPs, the on-hand air support through the use of Su-24s that we've seen before in this video, means that they're going to basically be having a one-to-one fight, and that's just simply not a good idea. The conventional wisdom is that in an attack, you need to have 3-to-1 odds for it to be successful. Now, you can either do that by massing simply 3 times as many troops as what the enemy has as defenders in that area. Oh, and some counter battery going on there. Unfortunately, the loss of the Su-24 resulted, as I was saying. Or you can make use of supporting arms to change the battle's numbers in your favour. For instance, if we were to actually look at this defensive belt here in the forests along the road, if there was just simply 2 MLRS units ready to fire, Blue 4 would be able to stun panic everything in those 2 areas, and that would mean that they would be able to push much more quickly against Golf, because units which are panicked have a negative 50 chance to hit, and they have a quadrupling, that's 4 times, of the reload interval. So say if a unit takes 6 seconds between shots, it would now take 24 seconds, which is quite the major difference. It turns like the big scary M1A2 or T80U into a defenseless little kitten. You can basically just drive up to it with shit tanks and just seal club the thing to death. I do it all the time. It's quite fun. And Maz is just throwing some BTRs away on that spawn point just to kind of see, hey, is there anything there? Keep on a little bit of pressure, and to make sure that Blue 4 can't kind of build up without him knowing about it. And another little push forward by Blue 4 along the coastal road to Golf, knocking out some chaff T-34s. But of course, since each T-34 is only worth 10 points each, it's a waste of ammo basically. Since especially this means that all those Chimeras and M1 Abrams are holding in place for the BMP 1Ps to get their missiles off. And we also see an Mi-28 moving in to add its fire. However, the ADATs, which are right behind it, are countering that, and bam, and down it goes. However, at 70% of points to win the match, and 16 minutes on the clock, Blue 4 means that Blue 4 has just left things too late, and they're going to not be able to turn the match around from this point, even if they do somehow manage to uncap 2 zones. Now some strikers moving in to hope, which I can only assume was to hopefully move the ATGM balance in favour of Red 4, so that the attacking units up front would be able to reveal units, pin them in place, while the strikers following behind can let off their missiles and knock them out quickly. Because units at the front line of an attack quickly become panicked, and as I discussed before, not nearly as good at what they're doing as they were when they're, say, sober. And a little bit of air-to-air trading going on, and Sam's firing off missiles, and some AA fire as well. Very excellent placing of that Mi-24V behind the defensive line, however. It means that the Hind is in a great place to shoot at the first line of enemy attackers, but is also protected against enemy anti-helo cover. And Su-24M coming in to hit those strikers, and bam! Wiped out before they can do anything. Very much a bit of a setback to Blue 4. However, Banzer has also gotten a RM-70 missile launcher up to his defensive line, and the great thing about the RM-70 is that it actually carries a second load of missiles for an attack. So it's able to carry 2 rocket strikes at once, and for the extra cost of only 15 points more than the Grad, which has the same sort of attack capability, directly speaking, it's quite the steal. As it also means that on an attack or a defense, the RM-70 is able to stun and panic the first line of enemy defenses, and then as soon as you've taken that section and the enemy has moved up reserves to protect against your exploitation of that area, you can hit the second attack. Sorry, you can hit the second line of defenses. Like for example, if we were to switch around the forces in this battle, and that Red was pushing on Golf, you would have been able to use the first round of artillery to hit the forests, and then you would have been able to hit the city itself while your units are moving in. So quite the powerful little combination there. I really like that unit. And some sappers taking on Sapper Z and some BTRs. Because Maz is wanting to keep the pressure on while the Blue 4 players are attacking. Because if there's one limiting factor that you can always rely upon is players' attention. You can't have the number of enemy players is the exact number of specific areas that they can concentrate on. So if you can keep the enemy off balance by hitting them in the flanks while they're trying to attack you, you can often actually fatally distract them from their attack, or you can make some pretty major gains while you blunt them using stationary defense forces. And here we see the excellent value of rocket artillery being used on the defensive actually, because those forces that were moving in to attack those last scattered defenders of the forests have now all been stunned and panicked, so they are going to be much less effective in pushing. And let's get a nice little picturesque view of this T-64BV killing capitalists and taking names, and earning himself a little red banner. Boom, headshot. And some Humvee infantry charging on some BMPs and T-64As trying to get into the town. However, since those units are unarmoured and take quadruple damage to any incoming AP attack, so any heat damage or kinetic energy damage from a tank shell basically means that anything that was in those vehicles gets wiped out at a stroke. And here also highlights the problem with attacking onto Golf through this narrow coastal road, is that any enemy support that hits your forces moving in is going to be much more effective than normal because you simply cannot spread out enough to make it less of a problem. Because one bombing strike, one grad strike, or even worse, a napalm strike, 2 of them is able to just totally block your path forward. So when attacking along that road, you very much have to make contact and your way into Gulf itself as fast as possible, because if you get bogged down into this several minutes long grinding attack, all that happens is that the enemy moves up fresh reserves and it's just a constant shit show. Because when you attack, you want things to be very quick, then very brutal, and to suddenly smash the enemy away. And not only that, they haven't done anything to suppress the defences in Echo to keep them occupied, so the T-72B1s and some BMPTs are now getting in flank shots to the forces that are now caught in the forest area. So they're just going to get absolutely wiped out now. And with only 25 points or so to go, this match is effectively over, and Blue 4 has just simply been outplayed. Their main mistake was that they didn't really commit themselves into pushing on Echo or Foxtrot, because getting one of those zones at least means that if you have a command vehicle in it, it's a neutral battle. Nobody's winning, nobody's losing, and it can give you some time to actually really build up to make an attack on this map. Because if you are in a situation where you're bleeding even 1 point, even let alone 2 points, you're very much forced to take really rapid action before you can actually make any difference to the battle. And there we have it. Communist victory.